Let's go straight. Even the old geezers. Let's go up to the Skype wall, and it's lovely to say hello to Doug Saunders from Canada's Globe and Mail, but he does run the European Bureau, so he's based here somewhere in the United Kingdom. Doug, from your point of view, you've written an article titled "Broken Britain, It's Never Been Better." So that's how you see it.
Certainly, these games have shown off a side of Britain, or at least of England, that I think a lot of us foreigners have forgotten about in all the gloom and doom news over the last couple of years, which is a fairly well-organized country with that knows how to put on an event. It does fairly well in athletics, and is quite comfortable with large crowds of people and so on. I would say it's been a good advertisement for Britain, but the fact is I think most of the world already have that idea in the back of their heads. It's nice that the sun came out and so on. But it has been a very well-run games. I've had experience with plenty of Olympics before, and there's usually some major fiasco or something. It's true, this one did follow the old pattern where in the days running up to the Olympics, everything seemed to be going wrong. We, in Canada, had the Winter Olympics in Vancouver 2 years ago, and it was just like that. Right up to the opening day, it seemed like a complete fiasco. The rain was pouring down, there was no snow. They botched the opening ceremony. Some poor bobsledder died, and it looked like a disaster. And then things just kicked in, and people got into it, and it really boosted the national mood and so on. So I think so. The question of whether there's going to be a legacy out of it is a bigger and trickier question, though.
I'm just, in your article, you do make note here of, it's interesting that things went so well during the Olympics when the way we talk about our country here, and you've reminded us, Broken Britain, Gone to the Dogs, A Cultural Cul-de-sac, and some of the more popular books at this time are The Rotten State of Britain, Bog Standard Britain, How Mediocrity Ruined This Great Nation. It's true.
There's a national culture of self-denigration, really. And I mean, you see it at the bus stop, you see it in the schoolyard, and so on. And people don't realize that, yes, okay, these are tricky times. The economy's not great. The riots last year showed that there's at least one group who feel disconnected from normal society, et cetera. But if you measure how things are doing, they're actually doing quite well. The education system, it's middling to decent. The transportation system, I don't think has ever been so good. I lived in England in the 80s, and people then were whinging endlessly about the nationalized rail system, and then 10 years later, people were whinging about the privatized rail system.
Yeah.
And I remember a few weeks before the games, I went down to Highbury Corner, and I took the train. I think they call it the Javelin train, out to Stratford for the first time. And I thought, oh, they've just got it right. I mean, this is how to move people around. And immediately I knew there were not going to be huge crowd problems. There weren't going to be the problems you saw in Greece or even in China with the crowds. And people knew how to organize it. Having tens of thousands of volunteers proved to be the real secret to success, I suspect. I think that's the invisible undergirding of these games that's making it work, is all those volunteers in the very embarrassing uniforms that they have to wear are keeping things trouble-free in ways that previous Olympics haven't done.
Doug, it's Patrick here. I mean, I read your article, and I must say I found it educative. It actually jolted me into reality, because I'm one of millions of curmudgeons that make up our society, and it was nice to see a bit of context. But you touched very briefly at the end of your initial remarks on legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll have a bet with you now that in 10 years' time, our child obesity figures. I mean, what is sport for? Sport is not really, when all's said and done, about Olympic medals. Luther talked earlier about the important thing is that children can start playing it more often. I think in 10 years' time, our child obesity figures will be as depressing as they are now. Would you argue vehemently with me?
Yeah, I tend to agree. Look, Olympics don't tend to produce legacies. There are various things that governments say that just won't happen. Tourism will not be helped by these Olympics. London is already one of the world's leading tourism destinations. What we've seen during the Games is London completely empty. I mean, there are a third as many tourists in London now as there are in a typical August, because while the Olympics attracted an additional 100,000 people per day, they drove away the 300,000 per day who'd be coming anyway. And even in Sydney, Australia, which was a successful Olympics by most measures, tourism was depressed for several years afterwards as a result of the Games. In Greece, it destroyed the tourism industry. In terms of fitness, there's never been much of a correlation between Olympic success and wider fitness. I mean, what Britain needs is better fitness programs, not necessarily in competitive sport, but getting people out and doing things and so on.
Yeah.
Childhood obesity is a big problem here, and I think it requires a commitment to physical education. I don't think it requires an investment in creating more gold medalists, though. There's not much of an attachment. And look, I should say, just as one cautionary thing, that yes, generally speaking, there's not that sort of mass phenomenon where everybody gets into sports as a result of the Olympics. Britain might be a little bit different. I think about the fact that after that one year when they had kids doing street dancing on the X-Files or Britain's Got Talent or whatever that was, and suddenly every 12-year-old in all of Britain was joining a street dancing club and so on. This country is much more given to mass phenomena and people, everyone joining a fad at once. It's entirely possible that there could be a moment when everybody just decides to get into swimming or something like that as a result of the high created by this, or track and field.
That's a very good point. Hey, Doug, thank you very much for your time, and appreciate you coming on the show. Doug Saunders there from the Globe and Mail in Canada.